efficiency of time as we wait for the team here to set up the chairs. I will sort of give a background of the session here today, and that is about transportation, an integrated network about transportation. And I know everyone here has no problem with transportation. We all got here on time, right? Now, even our vice governor was a bit hesitant to campaign on transportation because the challenges of transportation is obviously one of the biggest challenges, not just nationally, but especially in Jakarta. And for that purpose, IEF very strategically established this panel for this evening, and which in this panel we have several speakers here that will be with us today, and I'll mention their names and I'll ask them to kindly come up. First, we have Professor Mark Wallace. He is the director of the CTI-Monash Center for Optimisation in Travel, Transport, and Logistics at Monash University, Melbourne. So all the way from Melbourne, let's give a round of applause to Mr. Professor Mark Wallace. He is an Oxford alumni and very well known in the area of algorithms or computer algorithms or artificial intelligence for transportation. We also have with here today from the Ministry of Transport, Professor Dr. Wihana Kirana Jaya, who was mentioned several times by the Vice Governor today. And he is the Special Advisor to the Minister of Transport for the Investment and Economics. So his task is to bring private sector investment into the transportation infrastructure in Indonesia. We have also here today with us the President of MRT Jakarta, Dr. Engineer William Sabandar. Give a round of applause to Dr. William. And we have here today a lady who is a champion in the transportation sector, the former chairman of Organda, or the Land Transportation Organization, Ibu Eka Sari Lorena Soerbakti, the chair of the vice president of PT Lorena Karina. Most of her know her as the champion of the buses in Jakarta and Indonesia. So a good panel today, and we'll have a panel discussion. And now I think everything is ready, so we shall begin to proceed with the session. So for the beginning, to begin the session, I will ask Professor Mark Wallace about his outlook of the landscape in transportation and the trends in transportation and what his views are could be the solutions for Jakarta. So with that, Professor Mark Wallace, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. And one thing I must apologize is that we had to cut short the really interesting last discussion from the Vice Governor. I thought that was fascinating. So I feel like an advert coming in the middle of an interesting television program. So thanks for the invite to come, and it's been a wonderful, fascinating meeting and conference, and a lot of interesting and really friendly people. So it's been great to come here to Jakarta for my first time. My background is actually not in transportation infrastructure, but in artificial intelligence. And so we heard this morning about the importance of artificial intelligence. Okay, is that better? I went from artificial intelligence into optimization, and it's really from that angle that we're going to address transport. At least I'm going to be addressing transport today. So we started applying artificial intelligence tools to some problems for British Airways and saved them some planes, and did some work for Cisco on the resilience of their networks, and so they've used our software in their products. And so I've ended up in transportation infrastructure really by default, by the fact that things went well with those projects, and so now we're doing a lot of work on fleet scheduling and on passenger transport. And if you look at transport in more generally, we can think of the kind of wide area network kind of transport, so looking at the transport across the whole country, and then the local networks, really looking at transport within the urban environment. And a solution to the urban network problem would be just to build enough roads that you could all travel anywhere across the city, but there would be no room for any houses anymore. So really, that's not the solution. So if we look initially at the wide area transport, that's building ports and motorways, that kind of a more ambitious project. We were looking at the port of Port Hedland in the north of Australia, just looking at the capacity issues there and what happens as the ships coming in are larger, and looking at the export capacity. And when we actually examined the whole port and simulated the behavior of the port, it turned out that the actual throughput of the port was much less than you would expect. And so we looked at the land transport side, the railway side, but actually the bottleneck was at the interface between the seaport and the rail network. So it's really at that interface between the parts. And often looking at a wide area transport problem, you see a whole lot of different issues to resolve, and you break down, you decompose the problem into pieces. But if you decompose it in the wrong way, then you don't see that the problem is at the interface. So the way you can tackle a wide area problem is really very important, how you decompose it and how you understand those particular issues. So I want to focus in this discussion really on the urban transport. Unfortunately, and it would be nice if we didn't have to have people moving around at all, we could just have automated vehicles and freight being moved. But transport has a whole lot of different aspects that it underpins. So really the vision for transport is to be able to support the economy. It empowers a country. So that the transport is absolutely essential for making the opportunity turn into actuality, to actually realizing the potential of a country. But the second aspect of transport, if I look around, is it kind of conflicts with the empowerment. It's actually the protection of the environment so that we can be sustainable and continue to have a livable environment and a livable state into the future. And of course, the third aspect is to support the social requirements. Actually, it's got to be a country worth living in. So we've got to protect the environment, we've got to make it a country worth living in, but there are gaps that we have to close if we're going to actually achieve what we're aiming for. So in terms of empowerment, we've actually got to be able to get to the places where we need to. So if it takes between 1 and 2.5 hours and you don't know how long to get there, that's actually going to impact and cost the economy. And if you're blowing out all kinds of pollution and greenhouse gases, then you don't have sustainability. And if you've got to support the social, the travel to work, the travel for the children to the school, to go shopping, to the retail centres, to the airports and transport hubs, to the hospital in times of danger, then you need a transport functioning system that functions effectively and well. So Jakarta has been named the city with the worst traffic congestion in the world. I don't know if that's always the case, but that was it in some of the costs that references that I've looked at. There's a huge cost in the congestion, and we're looking at $5 billion a year. We're looking at the pollution in Jakarta, and maybe these figures we can be updated more precisely by locals here, but there are some real issues to tackle in terms of the urban transport problems in Jakarta. So how can we tackle these problems? Well, one approach is to improve the transport network, to improve the infrastructure and make it work effectively. The next is to actually reduce the number of vehicles on the streets by having public transport, by people sharing vehicles, and to have improved public transport access. And the third is actually to be able to make more use of the infrastructure that we have by coordination and making things work more effectively. So I want to look at these particular solutions just briefly one by one. So in terms of putting an investment into the infrastructure, this is a really expensive approach. And a typical example was the Sydney Cross-City Tunnel, where there was a great investment, but what it actually caused was it just moved the congestion from one place to another. So from one side of the river to the other side of the river. And this can happen very, very frequently. And there's a famous paradox by a guy called Brace, where you can actually add an extra road into a network and actually make everybody's journeys longer for every single person who's using that road network. This seems very unintuitive. You'd think that people would just not use that road and they would at least be as fast as they were before. But because people pursue their own optimization, you get to what's called a user optimum rather than a social optimum, and you can actually get the whole network being made to go slower by building in a new roads. And there are actually some examples of that working out in practice when investment has been made in new roads. Looking more generally at cities, I was involved in an article just in the Lancet, so looking at health and transport and development. And we were looking at how the infrastructure of a city can affect the transport health. And so we were measuring health in terms of disability-affected life years. So these are all the diseases you can get and the injuries you can get and the physical injuries you can get through the exercise you may or may not get and through the pollution that you breathe in due to the transport. And so we looked at a compact city where you increase the density, where you reduce the distance to public transport, and where you increase the diversity so that people do actually travel more locally to work, which is a bit of the case that we heard in Jakarta now. And by improving all those things, making cities more compact, you can indeed improve the health of people. But we got some unintuitive results as well. So looking at the impact in certain highly motorized cities, and Melbourne was one of those, well, we looked at cities around the world, including cities like Delhi, Sao Paulo, London, Boston, looked at Copenhagen. So the cities which are more motorized, actually, when you had a more compact city where people were using more active transport, there were more accidents and more injuries. So it's not just about compactness, it's about understanding how the transport system maps onto the infrastructure. And in this case, the separation of the active transport, the bicycles and the walking places from the roads was absolutely essential to get the physical benefit, the health benefits out of compaction. What I really want to sum up with, coming from an AI and an optimization background, is that the cheaper investment into the current infrastructure, making this infrastructure work for us, is actually a much more effective way to get benefit and to get fast results. And so simple things like making certain cars with certain car numbers work on certain days of the week, as happens now in Jakarta, that's a very effective and cheap solution, or a cheap step towards improving the transport issues. But some bigger issues are really around coordinating all the journeys. So if people could monitor to register, say, I want to go here and there, to coordinate journeys, you can actually get a lot of benefit out of that. You can get a great benefit by having traffic control systems which are coordinated. So when you actually know where people are going, a bit more insight into that, you can make the traffic signals increase the actual throughput of roads, and that's been used quite effectively in Melbourne in recent years. If you coordinate the public transport so that you may have to change buses, but you know exactly that the next bus is going to coordinate with the one you're on, then people are much more prepared to take public transport, and so you can actually dramatically increase the uptake of public transport. What you need to have is mechanisms to persuade people to actually do the things which are socially effective, which actually reduce the congestion, and that's a real challenge. So time of day pricing has been effective in many countries. So in Europe, this is really beginning to take off and having a dramatic effect on urban congestion. And disruption handling is, again, a really important piece where you understand something is going to be late. How do you minimize the impact on everybody's travel times and all the passengers? And these are all aspects that you can tackle using artificial intelligence techniques and optimization techniques. And they're fast, effective, and they're quick and cheap. So approaches that work on this, we're studying at the Institute of Transport Studies at Monash. So we're looking at transport system safety, how to reduce the accidents coming from transport systems. We're looking at network modeling and optimization, at public transport and the coordination and how to encourage people to actually take public transport. At demand management, at actually persuading people to use roads, not at the peak hours, but at other hours. Cheapening prices early before 6, 7 o'clock in the morning so as to persuade people to take public transport earlier and avoid the peak hour. Encouraging cycling and walking. And at the social aspect as well, to how to manage change and persuade people to change their behaviors. In particular, an area that I've been interested in from the AI point of view, a lot of people have been working for years on rail coordination, which has been quite sophisticatedly solved with mathematical optimization, But the new constraint optimization techniques allow you to solve the problem more precisely and not only predict in more generally what the flows are going to be, but actually schedule the trains and get truly practical solutions to complex problems. So this is a photograph of a building in Monash, but it's actually not the building where the Institute of Transport Studies is, but it's quite a spectacular building. But I just wanted to say a couple of things that the Transport Studies Institute do an awful lot of work with some of the major public transport authorities around the world and manage large events like the Olympic Games and the Hajj in Melbourne. So we've got a lot of practical expertise in using our skills to tackle practical transport problems. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Wallace. An interesting balance in the Institute. You have the analytics, but you also have the behavior. So that could be a conversation in our panel later on today. Secondly, we have from the Ministry of Transport, the Special Advisor of the Minister for Investment and Economic Affairs, Professor Dr. Wihana Kirana Jaya. He is alumni of Monash University. And he was the Dean of the School of Business of University Gadjah Mada and one of the leading thinkers and academics and economists in the transportation sector in Indonesia today. So the floor is yours, Professor Wihana. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Pak Josh, for giving me opportunity. Well, I would like to continue what my minister mentioned this morning for the speech. Actually, we are going to more concerned about what are we going to go with the grid of Jakarta, especially for the 2045. As you know that we already globally connected and also locally integrated. Even the vice governor mentioned about, well, we can globally connected and locally connected, but without what we call avoid locally wisdom, local wisdom. This is one of the important. As you know, where our position, especially when we're talking about the grid of Jakarta, I would like to say that a lot of complexity. Complexity means many problems, especially for congestion, for traffic jams, and also for pollutions, and also for lack of supervision, especially for the bus. Yeah. So a lot of accessibility, a lot of supervision, especially supervision for the government. So when we talk about where we are, our position, especially for Greater Jakarta transportation, maybe we have to move back to look at for the theoretical side. Jakarta grid is a part of agglomeration, urbanization. Yeah. Based on theory, if there is urbanization, agglomeration, there will be a connectivitas each region to other regions. Yeah. So it means we have more competitive, we have more economic of scale, we have more productivity and so on. But now Jakarta is more problem. Yeah? Congestion cost now is almost, we can see it's almost take 63 trillion rupiah. Yeah? If we calculate from the congestion cost. So it's mean every year we spend 63 trillion per year, yeah, according to from the Compass. And the next, I would like also to talk about since we know about where we are now, and then what we are going to go, what our strategies. Yeah, my minister tried to transform the idea from not depend on national budget, but also source from others non-budget. We call it PINA, or we call it public-private partnerships, or we call it creative funding. This is what we are going to do with the bureaucratic transformation, especially to provide Jakarta greater transportation. Yeah? For instance, first we have to do with our mindset. Yeah? We have to change the mindset. Second step, we have to change our regulation. Our regulation not support the grid of Jakarta for the 2045. Yeah? So we need something more deregulation or debureaucratizations. Yeah? This is our transformation. So when we know about our position for greater transportation of Jakarta, now we are going to do with our strategic. What kind of transportation revolution 2045? Yeah? For 2045, we know that we need more Jakarta, like Vice Governor mentioned, more friendly, more green, yeah? More smart. Yeah? So when we plan 1 year, it's good that we plan the paddy rice. But when we are going to plan 10 years, we are going to plant the tree. But when we plan 50 or 100 years, we have to educate our people. Yeah? So the 2045 transportation era, our people also changed the lifestyle. They are more urbanized. We can see from Melbourne Central. We can see also from Singapore. So people changed because there's a massive transport like MRT, LRT, bus, tram, taxi, and personal car as well. So there will be dramatical change for the behavior of people. That's why we have to stand. Another point that I'll mention is what kind of Jakarta smart city for 2045? We have to have more smart people. And the second one, we also have a smart economic. The Vice Government also mentioned that 2045 maybe one of 10 smart company will be ranked in 100 fortune, business fortune in the world. Yeah? At least there's a smart economics. And also there is a smart environment, smart government, and smart of living. This is our dream for 2045. That's why we have now the director of MRT. We also have the LRT. We have put the LRT as well. We also put commuter lines. And we also develop smart airport, like Jakarta Smart Airport. So we move from the industrial standard 2.0, move to 3.0, or maybe 4.0. Everything using by digitalized. Yeah? This is what we think about Jakarta 2045. Yeah? Another requirement is we have to access the upper mode. So how to integrate every mode, transportation mode like rail, bus, taxi, and also from plane, airport, so goes to Jakarta. Even from the port, like port in Jakarta, there's something connection between all of that. Yeah? So the technology should be prepared for our minister. That's why my three question is, how do we get there? Eh? How to get our strategics, especially, we have to integrate transport network. The Vice Government mentioned about TOD. Yeah? So when we build the rail project in the world should be subsidized by governments. Yeah? But in our program is, we try to sell the TOD, transit-oriented development, like in Dukuh Atas. Yeah? Dukuh Atas, in front of our hotel. Yeah? That's one of the transit-oriented development. There will be a lot of investment activity, yeah? For a new spatial arrangement to create pedestrian-oriented, using mixed-use community centered around with high quality of train to make it possible to live completely dependent on car for mobility or survival. Last month, I visited King Cross in London. Yeah? So everybody, when hear the King Cross, maybe everybody smile, think about red light or something like that. Yeah? But in London, King Cross already changed dramatically, become smart city because there's an integrated transport mode, yeah? Like tube and also computer lines, also bus, and many mode in one integrated. So this is one of the transit-oriented development using the best practice. I imagine, Pak Jos, Kali Jodo may be one of the King Cross benchmarking, how to change from red light area using transport mode integration, create a lot of economic value, co-creation, hub of activity, leader of the leaderships for the management of transportation. So this is what we are going to do. That's why to success TOD, transit-oriented development, we need government policy to prepare ecosystem, collaboration between multi-stakeholder like private sector, multi-stakeholder, the player, and so on. Another point, the last that I'm going to mention, especially, do we have on the right track or not? When we're talking about the Greater Jakarta 2045, yeah? For the time being, we already developed technology in transportation system, yeah? We changed, yeah? Using the people, traffic flow, open the data. Professor Wallace just mentioned about data collection, data analytics. And also we connect with the business application, yeah? Using convention and efficiency, everything under our system. Hopefully, we will collaborate with Monash Transport Institute to predict the behavior of people, even by MRT or LRT, or bus, or online car, or offline, traditional car, how to predict that behavior, yeah? So, using big data, structured and unstructured data, including social media, we can predict using the model, using our machine learning. The behavior of people can be predicted by the machine, and then we develop the model from the machine using algorithmic approach. So we try, like in Singapore, they're also one of Singapore transportation studies using the big data. So big data analytics very powerful for our system. So we are on the right track to fulfill what the Jakarta Greater 2045. The last transportation system, we also developed intelligent transportation system in our office, yeah? Especially how to using real-time moving ship. We developed in APONET, collaboration with Minister of Economic Coordinations. There's a single window also, how to connect the behavior of ship directly, and also we are going to predict flights, traffic, how to use, at least the data is already there, but the model cannot be developed yet. This is one of the important things. So last but not least, our terminal, Jakarta Airport, has already developed smart airport, digital airports, yeah, using all the panel or move it, integrated public transport applications. But at least we are already developed the data, the basic data, but we have not yet developed the model, how to predict the behavior of the people moving one place to another place. So this is our presentation that our Minister of the Minister of Transportation now is already aware what we are going to make a good system for Jakarta Greater 2045. And the strategic, especially not for our minister working by ourselves, but we have connected with the private sector under public-private partnership. This is one of the opportunity to investor to come to our program for the next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Kirana. Wihana, Kirana, Jaya, and very interestingly enough, transportation infrastructure is just not brick and mortar, but there's also behavior analysis, and in that, the future we can see in terms of transportation is going into the big data, artificial intelligence, and predicting the behavior of passengers and society as they move around the city. And so with that, now we have the president of MRT Jakarta, Dr. Engineer William Sabandar. He is also an Australian alumni, but UNSW, right? And also from the University of New Zealand, so the floor is yours, sir. Yeah. Can I, please?
Thank you very much, Pa George. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. I feel very challenging and difficult to speak after my boss, the Vice Governor, occupying the whole stage this afternoon. But let me just focus on the transport system, the MRT, a long-awaited transport system that Jakartan people are expecting to have in 2019. Let me start with the problem. My colleague has mentioned we have the population of 10 million. At the daytime, it's 11 million populations, and the rate of the development of the road is not going along with the private cars. So the congestions, the cost of congestion is it's expected to be $5 billion US per year. So that is the main challenge that's recommending why we need the solutions of mass rapid transit in the city. And the answer cannot be just an MRT. MRT is not a solution. The answer is you need to have an integration public transport system. And what is the integration of public transport system? I mentioned 3 things. Number 1 is, of course, you need a integration of transport infrastructures, like what we are doing now. So there is so many transport infrastructure being built, roads, rail systems, being built around the cities. This is one, but that is also not enough. The second one is you need the integration in the public transport service, and that is what we are actually trying to do right now. So public transport service integration is also needed, but the key is actually the integration in the policy development, and that is what the governor, the vice governor is trying hard to develop, how we can bring all together the integration that promote the use of public transport system in Jakarta, in the city. Without the integration in the policy, I think the infrastructure, the service that you are building now, it's just going to be waste. Because key is actually how the city can promote the use of public transport system by the whole communities, leaving out the private transport and going together into the public transport. But then you need to create a convenient public transport. You need to create an integrated public transport. You need to create a safe public transport, and people can transfer into this. And this is what are the effort that we are trying to do together with other public transport in order to ensure that there is a end-to-end public transport service. From your house to the end to the office, that should be a service, that should be a good service, which is provided by a good policy. MRT Jakarta is just one part, and this is what I'm going to explain to you. We are mandated 3 things. One is to provide the infrastructure for mass rapid transit. The second one is actually to provide the service of mass rapid transit, to operate when it is finished, to operate mass rapid transit. And the third one is actually to play the business development around, in the station and around the stations, to provide sustainability, because you cannot actually provide sustainability just from running the train. Our experience say you have to complement it with non-fare box revenue. That's I'm going to tell you in a minute. But those 3 mandates that we have at the moment that we are now going, as you see now, is the first line, 16 kilometers from the south of Jakarta to the mid of Jakarta, to the center of Jakarta, from Lebak Bulus to Bundaran Hai is our first line, 16 kilometers, which is expected to be finished by February, to be completed by February 2019. And our commercial operation will be starting in March 2019. We are having a new train which is now being set up, being produced in Japan. There will be 16 trains consisting of 6 cars that will be coming in March next year. We are expecting to finish the construction by August next year before the Asian Games. That is our promise. And that is the integration testing will be done by September. The trial run, the train will operate but without the passengers, testing for 3 months. And by February it's completed, and March we are start for the first line. This is just the first line. The second line will go from Bundaran Hai to the north, to Kota Tua, 8.3 kilometers. The total investment is about $4 billion US. That is, we are very much secure at the moment. But the third line, which is actually crossing from east to west, it's 87 kilometers. So by 2025, Jakarta is expected to have around 110 kilometers from the south to the north, and from east to the west. So this is the first metro system that we have in Jakarta. Now, it is not enough to do the operation. To do the transport is one, but then you need to complement it with the business around the station. Otherwise, the station will be crowded. Like what Pak Jaya mentioned, Pak Wihana Jaya mentioned, is the station needs to be catered with the service around the stations. So otherwise, the interconnection will be poor, and there will be a crowded. The economic value of the area will be very bad. So what we are actually trying to do now is the development of creating the new economic value of the stations and the area around the stations, what is popularly called transit-oriented development. The first line that we are now trying to do is actually the first line. Our first line consisting of 13 stations. So from Lebak Bulus to Bundaran Hai, there are 13 stations, 7 elevated stations, and 6 underground stations. So we are going to have six underground TOD. Yeah. For example, at Bundaran Hai, we are going to have the Bundaran Hai. And the way you work with this, you cannot work alone, because you have to work with the government, you have to work with the property developer around that area. So what we are trying to encouraging now is to work together with property around this together to increase the economic value of the area around that, to create the vibrant area. And then, by then, the benefit will be for all of us. The benefit from the government, they will take revenue because of the tax. The benefit from MRT, for sure, there will be increment in the ridership. The benefit for the property is actually the increment of the economic value of the area. So, but that you need to work together in that equation, and then you create the benefit for the public. Pak Anies and Pak Sandi mentioned that is inclusivity. So the area needs to be for the all Jakartans, not just for the rich Jakartan. So what we are trying to do now is to create space, public space that are actually available for all Jakartans. Now this will change the landscape of Jakarta, because the combination of property development and the new line will actually change the concentration of how Jakarta is developed. The density will happen, it's actually in the station and the area around the station. So Jakarta, MRT, Jakarta can no longer work together only with the transport operator. They needs to work with business, and that is actually what we are actually offering, that we want to work together with the business, with the developer, with the properties, in order to shape Jakarta, the landscape of Jakarta, to the future, to create the vibrant Jakarta. At the end of my presentation, I will say, although it is a transport sector, although it's a transport business, but MRT Jakarta cannot work alone. They need to work with others. They need to work with other transport sectors. They need to work with people. They need to work with business. They need to work with the properties. So it's a business, but it's not just transport business. It's about changing culture. It's about changing the lifestyle of the people of Jakarta. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. William Sabandar, thank you very much. Again, I believe that's your mobile phone, Professor. Again, the balance between infrastructure, technology, and behavior. That comes up again 3 times in our conversation. And so now we have a champion in transportation, a woman. Her name is Sari Lorena Soerbakti. I've known her for a long time, and she is Indonesia's champion for land transportation, the former chairman of Organda, and she is an alumni from the U.S. University of San Francisco.
Yes.
And a fellow of a very prestigious fellow, and that's called the Eisenhower Fellow Award, right?
Yes.
And so with that, as a player for a long time in Jakarta, and very dominant in buses, and other things, including your logistics. Please give your comments, remarks of what your thoughts are on Jakarta and how to connect Jakarta's transportation in the future, till 2045.
All right. Can I just sit here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So this is in Bahasa, we call it PW. Posisi wenak already, so I don't have to move. Okay, thank you very much, George. It is such an honor and pleasure to be here, and indeed, allow me to embrace the topic from the practitioner side, since currently we are operating more than 2,000 trucks all over Indonesia and several thousand buses. We serve from Sabang till Merauke. And usually during the meeting, I'm the only beautiful one, not because I'm really beautiful, but because there are not so many women in the industry currently. I hope in the future, several years to come, there will be more powerful women, smarter than myself, more charming than myself, hopefully. And I always believe that women, we are blessed to have a lot of characteristics that transportation in Indonesia really need. I firmly believe that a lot of problems that we have at the moment heavily related to a very small numbers of leaders who understand about transportation, about mobilities, about distribution, and how to create a sustainable transport in Indonesia. So we have heard earlier that Indonesia has great potential, a lot of resources, a lot of aspects that we could develop. But at the end of the day, we also acknowledge that having 17,000 islands, 260 million at the moment, where in 2045 it will be more than 320 million people will live in Indonesia. Plus we have more than 1,000 dialects in Indonesia, different characteristic, different preference, different trends. So I believe this will be quite a challenge if we don't try to create something robust from this year. I think it's a bit too late, but it's better late than never. I'm happy that, even though now my office in TBC Matupang, every day, heavily traffic because of the MRT, but I have a high hope that, soon it will be some enlightenment to solve the current situation in Indonesia. So, and the second point I would like to highlight is we have a lot of research already, we have a lot of plan, we have a lot of blueprints, we have a lot of programs, and nowadays with the technology, we don't have to have a meetings every day, we don't have to study overseas in order to understand a lot of things, but you can ask Mr. Google, and then you can, try to grab some information from many universities in order to understand what's going on, what needs to be done, what we can learn from other countries, what do they do in order to solve some challenges if we have A or B or C problems. I try to be practical here. For me, in order for us to be able to solve all of the challenges in transportation, first of all, we need the commitment from the regulator regarding how are we going to conduct transportation in Jakarta. We can have a lot of research, we can have a lot of study, we can have great plans, but if there will be no serious commitment with whatsoever, there will be no improvement in transportation. Until today, we understand that in Indonesia, it is very cheap, it is very easy to purchase a car, to purchase a motorcycle. During my term as the chairman of Organda, we have about 1.5 million members. We have about 550 districts distributed all over Indonesia. We successfully asked the government to ensure that everybody who will purchase a motorcycle should provide 30% down payment. But unfortunately now I did not see that anymore. So it is quite a challenge for us in order to shift people, from using to use private cars or private motorcycle to public transportation. So it's quite a challenge, but I believe a lot of smart people here, people understand how terrible to stuck in the middle of the road and you cannot go to the toilet, you cannot go to the restroom, even though, the nature is calling. So I hope after this meeting, a lot of people, hand in hand, try to push by their power, by their being, how to make some changes. Because 2045, even though 20-something years to come, like I thought my kids are still young, but now one of them is already in the US studying in the college, so you'll never know. We better prepare from now. So the commitment from the regulators is very crucial. I'm happy that I heard from Bapak Sandiaga Uno that transportation, even though it's not part of their main campaign, but still they understand that it has to be done something about it. The speed limit now in Jakarta average is less than 15 kilometers per hour. You can ride the bike faster than that actually. So it's a big problem. Really need support from the government in order to make some changes. The second point, I believe that we have to create a clear incentive and disincentive. I don't think anybody in this room would like to ride a bus if there is no force for people to try use public transportation, because the comfort that we have using a personal cars is much more greater than using public transportation. So in bahasa I always said paksa rela, you have to be forced in order to have a change of lifestyle. Change of lifestyle cannot be just oh yeah, would you please change your lifestyle? I don't think it will happen. It has to be enforced, it has to be created, it has to be developed in order to make sure that there are shifting way of lifestyle in Indonesia, in Jakarta especially, making sure that the speed limit in average, not only like 10 kilometers per hour, 5 kilometers per hour, but it can be a normal one. And I heard from President Director of MRT that in order to create some changes, in order to vouch for people to use public transportation, seriously, we need the collaboration from all stakeholders. So I always said the third major policy that we have to have, it will be the strategy by the regulators, also by the influential people, how the public, how to create an environment that empowering public to support all the policy that the government created. Because even though everybody say, okay, I'm the governor or I'm the vice governor, I would like this to be done because this is good. If the public, they don't really feel that this is crucial, this is necessary, or this is important, I don't think those things will take place. So I try to be simple here because, I learned a lot of things in school, but sometimes what we learn is not enough. A lot of practical matters need to be applied in order to make things happen. Because when I learned in America, Pak, I never learned about the little mob. Or in Jakarta, we call it preman, ya, Pak, ya. But I learned that if we try to deliver our goods to Sumatra, oh, they have a lot of mini mob, mini mafia from Jakarta to Bandar Lampung to other places. But I believe this is such a phenomenal moment for Indonesia because the potential that we have is such at large, and we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of smart people in Indonesia. So again, it depends on how the collaboration between the regulators and the public and a lot of entrepreneurs who are here together, we try to create something that not in the next 1 year, the next 2 years, or the next 3 years, but from now on till the 2045, making sure that Indonesia really can be the number 5, the most powerful economic country in the world. And I'm a very optimistic person, Pak George. So I believe, as we said earlier, if you can dream about it, you can do it. And I believe that, but a lot of homeworks, we have to do it together. I didn't want to sound pessimistic, but I think we have to be realistic. We have to understand what's going on, and we have to do with whatever challenges we have to, ensure that the potential we have not only become the potential, but really something beneficial for the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Eka. So we've just heard from Professor Wallace, the science of transportation. We heard from Professor Wihana, the policy of transportation. We heard from Dr. William, the future of MRT. And we heard from Ibu Eka, the reality of the situation. And so with that, I'm going to give to the floor a reality check, maybe, what your opinion is, or your questions to the panel here, because transportation is definitely a big issue in Indonesia.
My name is Alan. I'm actually a prospective PhD candidate for Monash University. My question is actually for 2 people. Okay, first one is for Professor Wallace. My question is that there are mathematical models that can somehow predict or describe close to a perfect situation when it comes to transportation and urban flows and everything. In your experience, has there ever been a particular model, a mathematical model that closely and perfectly resemble the kind of problem that most cities have in terms of traffic, urban flows, and those things that connected with it? And my second question is to Mr. Sabandar. For the MRT, one of your slides says that it requires a 60 megavolt ampere, right? And my question is that in order for you to supply the electricity, do you only rely on current electrical infrastructure, or in the future, as the needs progress, what is the strategy of MRT for tackling this problem, but at the same time not too dependent on, let's say, the state-owned electrical company? Those are the 2 questions that I'd like to ask. Thank you.
Please, on the left here.
Good evening. My name is Demas. I'm from Do Something Indonesia. We are under YCAP Foundation. I have a question for Mr. Sabandar and Mr. Kirana Jaya. It is actually related to the topic of safety and comfort of our citizens in Jakarta. There has been many cases of pickpockets and catcalling for the ladies. And it is also one of the dreams that was raised in Instagram of campaign.com, where we dream of Indonesia in 2045 that is free of catcalling. And I think this is also an important issue because these 2 problems are actually one of the blockage of the change of mindset from the private owners, car owners, to use the public transportation. Is there any strategy of to tackle those issues? And is this a responsibility that should be handled by the MRT or by the Ministry of Transportation? Thank you.
Thank you. Ibu, please.
Thank you. My name is Mariska Miketampi. I'm from Tarumanagara University, Jakarta, and also prospective student from Monash University. I would like to deliver such a response to the presentators, and also a decisive question to Professor Wihana about the public transportation policy in Indonesia. I'm very appreciate about the idea of collaboration from Ms. Eka Sari Lorena about the collaborative of every stakeholders in public transportation side to work together. But actually in Indonesia, there is a fluctuative regulation at all, because in 1 year, 2019, there are 2 regulations related to public transportation that have been enacted by the Minister of Transportation. It is the government regulation number 107 to replace the government regulation number 2028 about the public transportation. So, to Professor Wihana, how could we overcome this fluctuation of regulation in Indonesia in order every stakeholder and also public can can uphold all of the policy regarding public transportation in Indonesia, especially in Jakarta. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu. Now to the right, Brian, and then Bapak nanti ya. Okay, please, Brian, go ahead.
My name is Brian Davis, and I'm with Main Pacific Investments. I've had the pleasure of being involved in logistics and transportation for many, many years. And one of the areas that we look at, particularly with the transport plans that we've seen over the last 2 days, whilst being very welcome and look forward to, where's the discipline going to come from? Not only discipline for the people who are going to travel on the transport, but the people who are running it and the people responsible for the safety of the people. Thank you.
My name is Nico Po. I'm from Polax Properties. My question is to Mr. Sabandar. We've seen a lot of detailed plans on the first phase of the MRT. Would you be able to give a more detailed plans on the north side of the MRT stations? When would it be completed, and when will the detailed plans can be announced to the public? Thank you.
Sorry, can I, north side is?
From the Bundaran HI all the way up.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So because of the time allocation, I'm going to give this one term, and then I'll have our panelists here answer it. And the flow will be Professor Wallace first, and then Dr. William Sabandar, and then Professor Wihana, and then last but not least, Eka, and which I'd like to Eka also to give another reality check of the reality of on the ground on what these opinions or views are. Please, Professor Wallace.
So in terms of modeling transport systems, there's the classic 4-step model, which enables you to, given your knowledge about where everybody started and where they're trying to get to, you can understand how people are going to allocate themselves to public transport based on some assumptions, and then how they're going to, what route they're going to take to get to their destinations. But this does not help us to actually understand how to optimize the transport infrastructure so as to make things flow really smoothly.
Question comes to me. Pa Alan, sure there is now a plan, the first 65 megawatt is now we are dealing with the PLN, this is what, but we are going to need 400 to 600 megawatt very soon. That will likely to require a particular power plant. And this is something that the plan is actually dealing with because the current one is using diesel, and the plan now is actually trying to think about gas or even renewable energy. So that is actually, we are trying to reduce our dependency, but we are still working very closely with the PLN because this is the national company that is dealing with our delivery of our first train. But we are considering other sources of electricity in the future, especially when we are dealing with 600 megawatt, which definitely requiring a special power plant. From Pa Dimas is in the company, we have a motto: safety is our business. And then what we are actually trying to learn from a lot of the benchmarking that we are doing is, for example, with Japan, with Singapore, with Hong Kong, is always putting that this is safety is number one priority. So this is something that we are trying to do. If this is in operation, this kind of things, yeah, we are putting safety as the first element in our service level agreement. So we are doing the service level agreement, and we are putting safety at the very top of our priority. Then Bu Moriska, yes, I think this is for Pak Jaya, but I would like to echo what Ibu Eka just mentioned about that is the importance of the policy of moving, because this is going to be very critical. If the policy is not encouraging people to move from private transport to public transport, and that is going to be very difficult to the business of public transport to move. So this is something that the advocacy that we are trying to do to make sure there is a element of pushing people to use public transport. The last one from Pa Nico, detailed plan, Pa, we will have 8 stations, and different from the way we are dealing with the first phase, 13 station, we want actually to engage the property developers since the very beginning. So now we are doing the engineering design for the second phase to the north, and there will be 8 stations, starting from Bundaran Hai for sure, and then Sarina. This is a big station in Sarina, and there will be Monash, Harmoni, going to Sawah Besar, Kota, and then Kampung Bandan is the last. So next year we are going to design the TOD for this plan. So feel free to approach me or my team to discuss the possibility of doing business together in this TOD. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. Professor Wihana.
Thank you. Question from Dimas, especially when we use or setting the right design of institution or rule of the game, the two variables that we have to make sure. One is incentive. So people behave based on incentive structures. Yeah. So how to bring from personal car go to rail or trains. It's better to create the incentive structure first. The second is enforcement. Yeah. So especially when there's a pickpocket, yeah, we should use the standard of safety first, services, and safe. Yeah. Or we try to make what we call continuous improvement by our standard. Yeah. But using enforcement, especially pickpocket, or one as a good example from newspaper, I heard that one snake in the trains. Yeah, somebody brings snake and the snake free to other seat for people. It means that we don't apply our standard, especially safety. So one, enforcement should be one of kind of strategic to improve our standard. Second, the incentive structures. Yeah? When you got the incentive, you can change your behavior using your personal car or using train, LRT or MRT. This is one my suggestion. The second one, government regulation, is very difficult to answer. Yeah? The first step, we have to follow the basic law. Government regulation derived from basic law, and then government regulation will be applied by minister instruction or minister letter circulation, and then goes to the general directorate of our department, and we check. That's why our policy now try to more divide our regulation especially. Promote the business activity or not to promote business activity. But my minister tried to enforce, to draft, how to transform the idea, become entrepreneurs using by more innovative, more engagement, and more get the impact, high impact. This is a strategy. Maybe Lorena can help us. Me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Thank you, Professor. Please, Ibu Eka.
okay, thank you very much. Again, for me, I believe that to have a sustainable transportation in Jakarta, we need transparency. So people understand what are we build, what the government proceeding, doing, building, what are the progresses. So I believe the transparency regarding the process, the plan, other items should be there to make sure that people will support, to make sure that whoever run the show will follow accordingly, and to make sure that the budget that has been planned will be used up properly. So it's still big homework on this area, but I believe people will enforce making sure that all the aspects talking about transportation should embrace the transparency. Again, in order to be able to proceed sustainable transportation, the enforcement should be there. The enforcement, making sure no pickpockets, making sure nobody do the harassment to the ladies, making sure that it is safe to use public transportation, making sure the operator will follow the regulation implemented by the government also. So enforcement should be there. And again, with the current situation that we are on the process, developing a lot of infrastructures in Jakarta. So indeed, transportation and technology should be like brother and sister, should be like husband and wife. It has to be come together. There will be no sustainable transportation without a proper technology intact. So like for ourselves right now, you can order anything to our companies just using our apps. You don't have to call, you don't have to come, just use the apps, somebody will pick up your goods distribution and even deliver your tickets, to use the buses, to try to lease a truck. Nowadays, you don't have to call, but with technology, it saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of energy, making sure that the mobility of people, mobility of goods, especially in Jakarta with hefty traffics, can be proceeded. That's my closer. Thank you very much.
Very good, Ibu Eka. So with Ibu Eka's remarks, that pretty much concludes the session for today from the panelists. Yes, maybe currently we have our challenges, but from the conversation today, my impression, and I hope the audience impression, is there is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
For the MRT, because that is the future. Yeah. And the Ministry of Transport has a grand plan and is working with prestigious institutions like Monash to develop the data science. And we have practitioners like Eka who are champions in the industry. So the future till 2045, in fact, maybe in the next 5 years, looks good. And we hope that for Jakarta, traffic will be better and no more macet-macet. Yeah. So with that, we end this session for today, and I give the floor back to the Masters of Ceremony.
Thank you so much, Mr. George Marantika. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause